I would like to think, in terms of keeping with the theme, we're going to get an A++. So the whole demo that we're doing here and what we're talking about is really about taking the RESO standards and moving to utilization. So we are excited. The panel here, Jeremy was good enough to reach out to me in July and say, you know, we've been talking about auto-pop of green and energy efficiency data. Goes on probably 8 years or so. The RESO has been at the forefront from the beginning in terms of shaping the vision, pushing it forward. And so around July, Jeremy said, you think we'd be able to do a demo of what it looks like to auto-pop green, solar, energy efficiency data? I said, let's try. So here we are. We have some cool things to show. We were busy over the summer. And I'm going to do a little bit of a setup, but I'm lucky to be joined by Bob Burns from Pivotal Energy Solutions, who's an energy data aggregator, Matt Casey from CRS Data, who's a tax aggregator, and then Meg Garabrandt from New England Real Estate Network to talk about what this looks like on the MLS side. So I'm going to do just a couple setup slides. You've already seen my bio. I'll introduce the panel a bit more in a minute. But like I said, this vision for the idea of we're auto-popping tax data. If there are records out there about the energy efficiency, the greenness of a home, its solar capabilities, could we auto-pop that too? And from the beginning, the answer has always been yes. But then how we actually do that is what the question was. So we're here to talk to you more about that. And really, the panel really represents that there's two ways to go about auto-popping this data. That data could go right to the MLS, and then through the whole RESO ecosystem, or it could go to the tax provider and then onto the MLS. So either of those scenarios works for what we're talking about today. So again, I told you we're going to stick right to that concept of moving from standards to utilization. So the RESO standards have really driven the movement in this area from the very beginning. So I'm thrilled. The data dictionary from its very inception, Rob Larson had the vision very early on. So from the inception of the data dictionary, there's always been fields for different types of green or energy efficiency information. With the introduction of the silver certification, we got to the enumeration level, and in particular with two key areas. The third-party verifications, so when a builder is building a home to a green spec, that document that's resulted is an example of that, and then also power production. And so the silver certification level includes that level of detail, and then as we're going through the different certification levels, those additional fields and enumerations are being clarified. We already have over 400 MLSs certified to silver, so not necessarily all of them are implementing those specific fields, but we have that framework started, and we have MLSs really moving towards adopting and utilizing those fields. And then just another example, not only just of the RESO standard, but RESO as a standards organization embracing other industries that embrace standards and their industry standards. So the RESO wiki includes a mapping of all the fields in the RESO wiki that are also part of an energy data standard. It's called BEADS. So it's I gotta get it right. The Building Energy Data Exchange Specification is BEADS. And so the RESO wiki maps those fields that the people that are working as a contractor, a builder, a remodeler in the energy space, we're mapping their language of fields to our language of fields. And then just a quick sample, when I talk about the RESO wiki, I just pulled up one as an example. So Zero Energy Ready Home is a building specification that's managed by the US Department of Energy. Builders can build to that certification. That is an option for one of the standard RESO verifications. That's one of the enumerations. And it's probably hard to read here, but just under that kind of gold box there, you can see where it says BEADS, and it's doing that cross-referencing. So the standard is leading the way, the specification, the definition, the linkage to more information is all out there. And so that paved the way for the projects that we're going to talk about here today. For the purpose of the demos and the prototypes that we have to show you today, there's two types of two data sets that we looked at. So one is that verified energy data. So a builder built to a certification, provided that certification to the homeowner, and now they're marketing the home with that specification. So Jeremy mentioned this earlier today, but RESO, Council of MLS, the US Department of Energy collaborated on this home energy information guide. And this is really the space where what the consumer and the real estate folks are interacting with in the market. Now we have a link to describe in a user-friendly way what those things are, and then understand what are the RESO fields that back those things up. So in the bottom, you have a screenshot from the wiki that shows the green verification fields. Those are the building blocks to build what's in the home energy information guide, which is what a realtor or a consumer deal interacts with. So it's a score of how efficient their home is, or it's that certification. So those two things go together, and again, we're moving from the standards, which define the fields, to what's actually, what data sets are out there, and what does it look like to the consumer and the realtor. And then the other data set that we're demoing and talking about today is photovoltaics. So when there's solar, the solar is the source of the electric system in the house. That's photovoltaics. It's a form, a different one of the categories of solar energy. And again, we have a Capturing the Sun report, which it's actually a deep dive just into the concept of auto-popping solar data. RESO was part of a series of focus groups last year. This report was published, and as an output of that report, the fields that are now part of the data dictionary and that you see from that RESO wiki snippet actually came out of that process, and then were presented to the data dictionary working group. So again, this idea of the standard evolving, but how do we really use it in the real world? So with that, before I work through the panel here, a couple of next steps. Council of MLS is taking it that much further, so there will be a set of best practices around green data coming out in April. I invite you to watch for that, and if you have thoughts on what's happening in your market and what you perceive as a best practice, we'd love to hear from you. The data dictionary fields are out there, so implement them. You're going to hear about how the data sources are out there to auto-populate those fields, make it that much easier for realtors in the market to have that information right at their fingertips. And then we'll talk about it at the end, but there are these folks in the industry that are generating this data on the green energy efficiency solar side. So they're in your market, and they're targets and partners for you to bring this kind of data efficiency to your market. And then this is an ongoing space, so any kind of feedback and input you have on what we should be looking for, what you're seeing in your market, would be fantastic. So I'm going to transition now to the panel, and like I said, we have three great speakers. Bob is going to talk about the idea of where the data is coming from. Matt is going to talk about how you look at that against the property records, and then Meg is going to take us and show a preview of what that looks like live in a real MLS environment. So with that, I am going to call Bob to the podium, and Bob is the CEO for Pivotal Energy Solutions, and he's here to talk to us about aggregating the data that could be used for AutoPop.
Thanks, Laura. Hi, I'm Bob. I'm with Pivotal Energy Solutions. I'm traveling this week with our CTO, Steve Kloss, over there in the yellow shirt. Hi, Steve. As you can tell by perhaps the name of our company, we operate in the energy space, not in the real estate space. We're a software company based out of Phoenix, Arizona, founded in 2011. And for the last 5 years, our Axis platform has been used by energy efficiency program sponsors on the energy side as a data collection and reporting platform. And so that was going well, and about 2 years ago, one of our clients said that was going so well, our platform's doing a great job of capturing their energy efficiency program data, that they said, we'd like to actually have you capture all the green certifications happening within our 4-state region. And so that got us to thinking that there might be a role for us as a company to aggregate data at least at a minimum in that region for that customer, but perhaps nationally, so that we could create a conduit between the energy efficiency space and the real estate space, such that that data could be used to help enable transparency in the home buying process when it comes to energy efficiency, indoor air quality, those kind of things. And so that's really what we've focused on. About a year and a half ago, we entered into a data sharing agreement with NGBS, which is the National Green Building Standard. It's a national energy efficiency program sponsored by the National Association of Realtors. No. Home Builders, National Association of Home Builders. Anybody's going to get that wrong. And so they have about 115,000 certifications, both single-family and multifamily certifications, and that NGBS data set is kind of the data set that I'm going to be talking about, and Matt's going to be talking about a little bit as well during his portion of the presentation. So just a quick aside, about 6 months ago, as we started this data aggregation effort, we knew very little about how to get data into the real estate space. And that's when Laura and I reconnected after a couple years apart. And she put me in touch with Jeremy and the RESO organization. And quite honestly, thanks to you all establishing that standard, as Laura said, that with the help of Jeremy and Greg Lemon, helped us to achieve our data dictionary certification about 2 months ago. And so, you know, that's really enabled us, that standards enabled us to be here today, honestly, to be able to be in a position to be able to share this data. So, what we're going to talk about today, focus on, is the data aggregation and distribution efforts. So, first off, what kind of data are we aggregating on the energy side? It's energy efficiency data, water efficiency data, indoor air quality data, and also solar data. And so that data is coming primarily from 3 different kind of segments here. You have a new construction segment of the market for brand new builds. You also have, and there's a lot of different energy efficiency programs that are operating in that space. I mentioned the NGBS program there at the top. Other well-known names are Energy Star, the HERS Index, LEED. Indoor Air Plus is a federal government program for indoor air quality. WaterSense is a federal program for water efficiency as well. So there's this pocket of homes, volume of homes that are coming from the new construction space. There's also a pocket of homes coming from the existing home space. The programs being offered in that space are fewer logos. Home Performance with Energy Star is probably the most prominent program operating in the existing home space. And that's known by the HES score, HES, Home Energy Score, by the federal government, sponsored by the federal government, is very prevalent in that existing home space. So we're looking to aggregate data both from the programs operating in that new construction space, the existing home space, and then finally the solar industry. We haven't made much traction in the solar industry to date, but we're looking to try to engage solar installers to be able to get as accurate of data as possible, both for new and existing construction as well. So 3 points I want to make about this data aggregation and distribution effort. The first is these programs and the logos that you see are the people, the data that's coming from these programs is collected by accredited professionals on the energy side. So they're called raters, verifiers, energy building science experts. And so these are accredited people in the homes themselves doing this work. And so that's kind of an important point. We're going to come back to that in one of these slides here. But that brings a lot of credibility to the data that's being collected here. So this is actually verified data by people with boots on the ground in these homes. So the second point I want to make is about the type of data here, with the exception of the solar data, which if it's coming from a public record, if it's part of building permits and such, that might be public data. The majority of this other data coming from these other programs is actually going to be licensed data. So that's a little bit of a distinction that we on the energy side, I think, are going to have to sort out, so we can make that very easy for you all on the real estate side in order to consume this data. And then the final point is what was my final point? Yes, it is good. Is all about auto population. Yeah, that's it. We've heard so many horror stories about energy efficiency data being manually entered into MLSs, how badly that goes. And so we're focused strictly upon or on providing an auto-population solution for the industry. So all the conversations we've had to date, all the conversations we're trying to have moving forward are all about auto-population in order to remove that liability from realtors putting data in the system themselves. So next slide. So this is an example of the type of data at a minimum that you might see in an auto-populated energy listing. So as you're creating a listing in an MLS, again, forgive me if my terminology is a little off. I'm not a real estate expert, so I'm probably getting this vastly wrong. But so for an energy efficiency listing, this might be a minimum set. So for the NGBS example, the data set that we're talking about today, you'll have the green certification program name, the certifying body, the year the home was certified. Many of these programs use colors to designate the level of achievement they have in terms of their energy efficiency. And also there's generally, as energy code changes, there might be different versions of the specification, so you might have a different version that the program's been certified under. And finally, a source. So where's this data actually coming from? And the majority of our data is going to be coming directly from those program sponsors. So probably the highest level of credibility that you can have. So again, this is kind of the minimum set of data. But on the other end of the spectrum, for a subset of homes, some of those programs collect significantly more data than just that 6 data points that I showed you there. And for those programs, there's a significantly greater amount of data that we can share into the real estate space if it's valued or desired. And so the column on the left here shows some additional energy fields, energy-specific fields that might be of value, including things like whether it's a dual fuel type home, some of the expenses as well. A lot of the performance of the home for new construction is actually modeled, and so the consumption is calculated through some simulation engines to be able to give prospective home buyers an opportunity to see what their utility bill might be or should be when they move into the home. So there's some interesting information to be able to share over there on the energy side, but the right-hand column is another set of data. These are all RESO data dictionary fields. I want to make sure that's clear. But there's other fields here that, again, could be verified or are verified by these energy inspectors that are in the homes. So surprising to me when Laura said, hey, can you actually get like square footage information? It's like, well, of course we can. These people are out in these homes at least twice during the construction process, pre and post drywall. And so there's a lot of different fields here that might be of value to the industry, to the real estate industry, to be able to verify some of the data that you're using in your listings. So if there's more information that you'd like to see collected as an industry that you feel could be done in person while some of these folks are in the homes, we'd love to have that conversation so we can try to build that value prop for these folks that are in the home. So there's additional data that's actually flowing into our system that could be used in the energy efficiency space as well. Those fields aren't necessarily captured in the data dictionary spec right now, so we're going to be working with RESO to see if it's appropriate for those fields to be added as part of the data dictionary moving forward. And that includes things like insulation type and window types, door types, heating and mechanical equipment, all kinds of goodies. Again, not sure if it's really a value for the real estate industry or not. Love to have that conversation. So my final slide here talks a little bit about how this data can be used or accessed in the real estate space. Laura kind of talked about kind of the methods we've been approaching, and I think Matt's going to talk about that as well. Is we have now a RESO compliant API, so we can deliver a RESO compliant payload basically through our API directly to an MLS if you want to go that route. We also have the ability to go through kind of these third-party data aggregators or their property public databases as well, or through something like a Bridge Interactive thing where it's kind of a mix of some of these things. In terms of uses of this data moving forward, obviously we expect it to be used for auto-population of listings. portals, IDXs, that sort of thing. But we also see an application for appraisals, lenders, mortgage industry, and also for any kind of VR or augmented reality kind of tours. You know, it'd be kind of cool to see pop-ups of energy efficiency features, perhaps, as you're walking through a home in a virtual tour. And then also we'd be able to surface this data for as a source, as the URL source, so some additional documentation that we can provide, like an appraisal, the Green Addendum from the Appraisal Institute, those sort of things. So we can provide more documentation on some of the green features, green and energy efficient features of the home. So that's all I had. I think next up is Matt.
Yes, so Matt is the CEO for CRS Data, and while he's getting situated, when Jeremy called on us and said, do you think it's possible we could do a demo? We kind of zeroed in on the Vermont market as a case study. And so we said to Matt, here's the data, here's the National Green Building Standard data that Bob's got. There was solar data available publicly in Vermont, so we handed it over to Matt and said, how does it look? How does it match up? So Matt's going to share his perspective on that.
All right. Thank you, Laura. Just a little bit about CRS, if you don't know us. We've been in business since 1989, public record company. We're working with about 75 MLSs currently. We also interact some in the appraisal and lending space, so enough for the marketing. In terms of the conversation today, as Laura mentioned, you know, our role in this, so Niren is a customer of ours. We work with their MLS provider. In this case, that's Black Knight's Paragon product. Really had two goals on this project. Of course, we're dealing with two different data sets, but wanted to be able to ingest that data and then push it through by AutoPop, and then also looked at, you know, could we present that on a property report type level. So just very quickly, as Bob mentioned, you know, there are different pathways that the information can get to the realtor. Wanted to talk, there are a few benefits of going through a public record provider such as ourselves or like CoreLogic's Realist product or other products of a similar nature. Obviously, first and foremost is we have the data. You know, public record companies, that's what we do. We're going to have a broad footprint of information as opposed to just listing information. Another benefit we have, of course, is we're used to dealing with large volumes of data in terms of standardizing, you know, a standardization of addresses, certification of addresses, geocoding, that type of thing. And then, of course, a third benefit is since we do have those relationships with the MLS, if the data is integrated with our data, it can push through AutoPop without the MLS having to have additional relationships with you know, third parties, licensing, that type of thing. Real quick, a couple different methods. Bulk data, which seems a bit old school, I know, especially at a data standards conference. You know, one of the benefits though of bulk data is we can ingest that. We can do a lot more manipulation and matching. It also reduces the number of calls that have to be made when we're trying to do AutoPop. But naturally, it does require a higher level of data integration, which, depending on the data source, may not be very applicable. You know, sometimes a license will facilitate an API type call, but doesn't facilitate bulk transfer. You know, so the inverse of that, of course, API provides direct access to the data source. It does decrease the amount of data manipulation you can do, and it does have some licensing benefits. I'll quickly do a shameless plug for a talk I'm doing tomorrow on the Universal Property ID. One of the benefits as we continue to leverage these RESO standards, if the two data sets both had the UPI, or the PUID, as we used to call it, then the API works really well. That's something we're trying to get to. So next, I just wanted to give you just a little bit of stats about the two data sets. This is pretty dry stuff, but then again, we are at a real estate data conference. So the two data sets, the first one, PV or solar data, that information came from the Vermont Energy Atlas. Vermont is probably one of the best states in terms of publicly accessible solar data. It's not the best state in terms of data. It's fairly rural. Addresses aren't great. But real quickly, so what we had, our universe of data for the solar data set was just under 6,000 records, 5,958. We ingested those into our system, did some address standardization, certification, had about a 78% match rate there. So you can see that's a fairly low match rate. That speaks a bit to the quality of the addresses on the PV data and just the overall quality of addresses in Vermont. We then were able to, of those that we were able to match to a certified address, because the data set, that's the only geographical reference it had. No parcel ID, no XY, it's just an address-based data set. We were able to match that subset to our public record at an 87% rate. And then for those that didn't match, we did some additional work for georeferencing and matched about 182 more, so a total of 71%. If you're wondering why is all that relevant, what does that mean? Well, really, that means that there are now in Vermont 4,253 properties for which if a realtor is doing a listing, that information will pass through to Autopop and then eventually other reporting type things. Second data set, which Bob was nice enough to provide us, smaller data set from the National Green Building Standard data. So we're only talking about just a little over 200 records. You know, I think if you took anything away from Bob's portion of the presentation, it's the accuracy of the data, the fact that it's locally verified, et cetera. So the addresses are much better. That bears itself out. 95% of those matched to the USPS database. The match rate from there to our data is lower. A lot of that, there again, not to overly pick on Vermont, but it speaks to a bit to the quality of addresses there. The other thing that's the NGBS data, by definition, you're talking about new houses. There's often a lag between when a new house is addressed and built before it's added to the tax roll. So that probably speaks to some of that drop-off. And we were unable, of those, probably because there were not any existing parcels or we didn't have enough detail, we're not able to match any more from a geocoding standpoint. There again, though, at the end of the day, the match rate was about the same, 74%. So there were some properties. Bob's data was a little later in the cycle, so we didn't go all the way to Autopop, but just wanted to demonstrate the ability to ingest, match that data. So going from here to Autopop is really not that big of a deal, it just hasn't been done yet. My last slide, this is just kind of a quick mock-up. Meg's going to speak more to and have some slides to show how the Autopop would work. This is just a quick, you know, what it would look like. That's a portion of a CRS property report with power production and green verification information added as well. So that's just, so in addition to Autopop, which of course occurs when a listing is being entered, this is just a method that that information will be displayed anytime someone looks at that property. Yes. Yep.
All right, so without further ado, this is what you really came for. Could we actually do Autopop in an MLS environment? So as Matt said, we called on Niren, and they were nice enough to say yes, and we had enough time on the solar side. So what Meg is going to take us through is just for that solar set of data that started with those 6,000 records, and how that looked in terms of implementing it in an MLS. So take it away.
Great, thank you, Laura. So we're talking about Vermont data, but the Niren MLS is actually headquartered about 3,042 miles northeast of here in Concord, New Hampshire. And we are a little bit unique in that we cover, we have 5 entire states in our MLS database. We are the primary MLS covering all of New Hampshire and Vermont. We also allow membership and listings in Maine, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and also will be Connecticut before the end of the year. So we cover a vast territory. We do have some unique system and data needs because we do cover multiple states in their entirety. As Matt alluded to, a property unique identifier would be a great asset for us, not only in Vermont, which they sort of have one, but it's not tied into the solar data. So what I want to do today is run you through the Autopop process. We are using screenshots because with technology, something can always go wrong. We want to make sure we get through it today. So we do have over 10,000 users of our MLS software. just to give you an idea of the size. So when you come in to enter a listing, you really have two choices. The first, which was the one we would prefer people to use in the screen you're presented with, is the ability to search for property to initiate the auto-population process. So because we do cover 4 states, there is a manual process of switching over to, in this case, select Vermont tax data. So once you've done that, you're going to enter in some data elements to then search for the property that you are initiating a listing on. Once you have that, you can collect through and verify and evaluate the information that is available on that particular property. So this is what you're going to see on the tax report here. You'll notice that section at the bottom is the auto-population of the data for the power production fields that have been added in through CRS. So this is all sort of pulling data automatically in from the CRS tax database into this screen in our MLS system. Once you've identified that this is indeed the listing you were intending to get, you just check the little box, hit the autofill button, and then this screen here is going to show you the data elements that are going to auto-populate. So this is sort of where Paragon comes into play. So they had to add the power production fields into this particular form, and any field that has a data value in it is pre-selected to help with the ease of auto-population into a listing. So less work for the listing agent. They don't have to go through and actually select the fields they wish to use. They're pre-selected for them. If there's a data element that they don't want to auto-populate, they can deselect it and it will not auto-populate into their listing for them. So once you've had a chance to evaluate this, you hit save. And this is where it goes into the listing maintenance portion in the MLS software. You can see that the values have been pre-populated based on what we have available here. An interesting sort of takeaway and learning experience from this, because of the RESO data standards for these fields, it was I think a relatively easy process for CRS to build those data elements into their database. Obviously, they had to map from a different data source that maybe had different formatting, but Paragon also was able to create those fields in the same data source. So the integration and the two systems talking together was a great efficiency in making this happen. One element that we did notice is with any of the efficiency fields and other data elements in the data dictionary, a lot of them have a source, verification source field associated with them. In this instance, where you may have a data source that has some verified and validated data available to you, not all of the elements of that data may be verifiable or verified, and you do not wish to auto-populate them. So in this case, for a verification source, we did default it to public records. This is a single select field at present, but I have spoken with Rob some, and we're going to have some further conversation about the fact that there may be multiple sources of this data in a listing. So we maybe either need to make that a multi-select or add in source fields for the different data elements related to all of these green and energy efficient fields, which could be another interesting conversation. But an interesting learning takeaway with this AutoPop technology, that the source isn't necessarily going to be the same for all the data elements you have to populate. So once the data is in the system, how are our members going to convey this to their clients and customers? How are they going to find it in the system? How are they going to view this information on the property? So while we had some of the green fields on some of our other reports, we did create a special agent and customer green report view specific to include all of the RESO green power production fields. So the section on the report looks like this. There's a lot here. This isn't a real listing. This is one of our test listings because we always max them out and make sure that every possible field is populated for property report viewing aesthetics. So this one here has a lot. So you'll notice we do have all the green verification programs. We implemented 3 sets of those. There are properties in our market area that have 3 different certifications on them, believe it or not. The power production fields, we implemented 2 sets of those, one for solar, one for wind. We have encountered some properties, though, that do have 2 different solar installs on them as well, so there is an opportunity to enter that data effectively. And then the green marketing fields we have available as well. So we were in a little bit of a unique position in that we've had a lot of the green building certifications and the ability to indicate the presence of solar or wind in our MLS database for a number of years. But we went through a software conversion last year, and we took that opportunity to really convert all of our building certifications to the green program field, RESO compliant fields. So through that process, we did a lot of work to make sure that these and other fields that we had available in our database were RESO compliant. The power production fields at the time, we had to cut all of that work off, weren't completed yet, so we were able to add those in earlier this year along with the green marketing field. So we do have all of these now. So once the data is in, what happens with it? How do consumers find it? Where does it go? So what I have up here on the screen, there's a section in listing maintenance called data authorizations. This is where the listing agent with an override office setting as well can indicate whether they even want the property on the internet, whether they want it to go out to some of the third-party portal websites for marketing purposes, our own public-facing website. We do also include all of this data in most of our data feeds. So our intra-office, which is going to go back to the broker of the office, IDX, VOWs, and any specialty feeds for products where this data might be relevant to them. So we don't hold it captive. We want it out there. An interesting point to make, though, is our public-facing website, Naren.com, which is hosted and created by somebody who's speaking later today. They are the only one that's actually displaying all of this green data and power production data. So I'm kind of thinking back to Deborah's presentation yesterday, kind of about data and the major portals, and we're kicking some butt locally, I'll use that word instead of hers, in making sure that this data is available to the consumers, because they're the ones that are really looking for it. So it's out there. So I'll wrap up with, this is sort of our listing maintenance bucket for our green marketing and third-party verification fields. So when we redesigned our listing maintenance system, and actually we did this summer once we added in the green marketing and power production fields, we had the ability to kind of create containers in listing maintenance so that we could group this data together. There are properties that have these types of characteristics and certifications, but there's also more that don't. So we wanted to make it easy for the listing agent to kind of skip over these sections if they didn't have data to go in here. So we grouped them together into green marketing and third-party verifications, and then we had that separate bucket for the power production fields as well. So we are positioned that hopefully someday, Bob and other entities that have the third-party verification data, that we may be able to incorporate that into our public records database with CRS, and then also initiate that auto-population process as well.
Great, so we're going to wrap up. I started out by saying we were going to really hit the theme, so I'm going to give ourselves an A+ on theme. We talked about how we can use standards to move towards utilization. I'm going to give ourselves an A+ on time management. We started late, but we stay within our allotted time. We'll probably, unless I get a signal from the back, we'll probably have people come to the front if they have any questions, or we'll go out back. And then I want to give the team, I'm getting a 5-minute sign, so we can do a few questions. I just want to give the team an A+ because, like I said, Jeremy came to me in July and said, can we do this? And I said, let's try it, and we did it. Naren was live about 2 weeks ago with the solar data. And it's a great prototype on both ends. We know it is feasible. We know the standards lead the way, and we hope it's an inspiration for everyone to get out there, work with the energy providers in their market, and explore how this is feasible in your area. And then finally, there's a lot more coming on this. I know Betsy Hansen is in the room, but Council of MLS is doing a best practice guide around this. There's a poster that will be for anyone that's going to NAR in Chicago. There's a poster that's going to be in the registration area that says, ask your MLS about green fields. So we're really promoting utilization even on to, as Meg was talking, to the consumer and to the real estate agent to really get them excited about knowing that you all are out there implementing these fields. You all are out there doing innovations like bringing this data, auto-popping it for them, and really matching up with what the consumer is interacting with in the market and how the inventory of homes are changing, and really making sure that the standards allow us to deliver that information to the consumer, the agents, appraisers, as they expect us to do. So with that, why don't I see if there's one or two questions, and then I know the panel will be happy to take your questions offline as well. Anybody have a question for the panel? So I give us an A+ for that too? Okay, we have one, okay, all right. Go ahead.
I don't necessarily have a question, but I do have a comment. We have a lot of the green energy fields in our system, and they are extremely underutilized by the agents in terms of the, of just putting the data in type of thing.
Yep.
Whether that's because they're not getting it from the homeowners or whatever the situation is, it's there, but it's not being used. This looks like a wonderful way. If we're going to get it, we're going to have to get it for the agents because I don't know that they have the skill level to get it themselves. Agreed.
Great statement. Thank you. We wanted to focus on the technology piece of it, but you're absolutely right. If we don't get agents using it, it's not worth anything. So it's got to be both. So we have the benefit of doing the auto pop for those that are afraid or aren't sure, but we also have to work on getting agents to understand what information is out there, and if they're manually inputting it or auto popping it, we need to see more of these fields being utilized. Great point. Anyone want the last comment or question? All right, well, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.